The camera at the south gate of the Pell road grade recorded a two-door sedan leaving the closed road at 1:22 in the morning on December 29th. 4 frames, time-stamped, 31 seconds apart on a motion trigger. The directional tube I had stapled across that same gate opening recorded 2 outbound axle pairs in December and 0 inbound axle pairs for the 9 days before the 29th. Nothing drove in. Something drove out. Before I go on, if something like this happened where you work something, there was no form for put it in the comments. I read all of them. The next one I tell comes off the subscriber list. I checked the seals on both barricades that morning at 8:40, and both serial numbers matched what I'd written in my own book on the 20th, and there were 14 inches of unbroken snow on the grade for the first 190 feet north of the gate. I am the traffic and safety technician for the Huron County Road Commission, which is in the thumb of Michigan, the part that sticks out into Lake Huron. In plain words, my job is to count what uses our roads and then prove the count. I run the tube counters, I pull the gate cameras, I keep the crash data the state asks for. And once a year I certify our road mileage so the county gets its share of gas tax money. 11 years of pension credit. 1 certification with my name on it, renewable every 3 years. If my numbers are wrong, the money is wrong. And if the money is wrong, somebody drives up from Lansing and looks at me. The Pell road grade runs 2 1/10 miles north from M25, about 4 miles south of Port Hope, and dead ends at the 16-mile drain. It has been closed since 1962. The board vacated it that year in a resolution I could quote from memory by February, because I read it more times than I have read anything else in my life. Vacated and declared impassable, with maintenance limited to drain bank protection. In practice, that means 2 steel gates, 2 orange barricades with reflective panels, a wire seal on each hinge pin, and a camera on a cedar post that I service 4 times a year. The grade is built up about 6 feet above the fields on both sides, all heavy clay, and in winter, the whole thing looks like a white railroad bed with cattails on either shoulder. I found the frames because of a Monday habit. Every Monday, I reconcile the gate counts against the camera events for all 11 of our closed segments, inbound against outbound. And every Monday for 11 years, the 2 columns have matched, or the difference has had a name attached to it, usually a hunter with a 4-wheeler or a drain contractor who forgot to call. Pell had 2 outbound and nothing inbound. I assumed the tube had been chewed by a plow wing, so I pulled the camera card first to see who I was going to have to call. And instead I sat in a county truck with the engine running and looked at 4 frames of a car that had no business being in the county at all. The sedan is dark, 2 doors, with a roofline that drops straight into the trunk and no visible mirror on the passenger side. It fills the frame from the left, moving right to left as it comes through the gate opening. And in the second and third frames, the front wheel is off the ground, about the 3 inches, where the grade drops onto the M25 shoulder. 1 light. There is a single light source in all 4 frames, and it sits low and right of the car's center line, throwing a cone of about 15 feet onto the snow. The plate area is a gray smear. The frames are not blurred anywhere else. The cattails on the shoulder are sharp enough to count. I drove out to the gate that same morning and put in 3 hours I did not bill to anybody. The seals were intact, both hinge pins, both serial numbers, and I photographed them next to a tape. The barricade rails were snowed in to a depth of 9 inches on the windward side and had not been lifted. And 40 feet south of the gate, on the M25 shoulder, there were 2 tire tracks in the packed slush, headed south, 118 inches apart on the outside edges. They started at the shoulder. They did not come from the grade. On the grade itself, between the barricade and the gate. The snow was smooth, except for rabbit and one line of my own boot prints from the 20th, filled in soft but still readable. I spent the rest of that week eliminating things, because that is the part of my job that pays. A snowmobile leaves a 20-inch belt track and no separate tires. A four-wheeler leaves 4 tracks and a wheelbase under 70 inches. Our plow trucks are 11 feet across the wing and never enter a vacated segment. The camera is a bottom-of-the-line motion unit, and it does false trigger on wind-blown drift. But a false trigger gives you a white sheet, not a chrome bumper. I called our vendor in Saginaw and had them confirm the clock was pulled from a cell tower and could not have drifted more than 2 seconds in a year. I checked whether the card had been swapped. It had not. By Friday, I had used up every explanation I actually believed, and I still had a car leaving a road that no car had entered. There is a form for this. When a closed segment shows unauthorized entry, I write an incident memo, attach the event log and the count tape, and it goes to the sheriff's office and into our file for the year. It takes 15 minutes. I have filed 19 of them. I did not file this one. I wrote in my weekly log for the week ending January 2nd that Pell Road segment showed a counterfault under investigation, and I initialed it. And that sentence was the first thing I ever put my initials on that I knew was not true. I gave myself 1 week to find the real answer. That is what I told myself in the truck, out loud, like it was a schedule. Jerry Lentz has been managing director since 2016. He is 59. He keeps a folding table in the corner of his office with a coffee urn on it for the board meetings. And he has told me twice that he intends to make it to 2027, because that is the year his insurance bridges to Medicare. He is not a liar, and he is not a coward in any way you could point at. He is a man who understands exactly how much of his budget can survive being looked at. I went in on January 5th and asked him a question I thought was routine. I asked why the drain fund pays for a loaded gravel haul over a vacated segment every week, because I had cut that haul in September. And I wanted to make sure I had not cut something that had a legal reason behind it. He put down the certification packet he was reading. The state wants our mileage certified by the 2nd week of April. And Act 51 money is the difference between our summer chip seal program existing and not existing. And he had a stack of it on his desk, 2 inches thick. You cut it, he said. September 9th. It's in the memo. 240 hauls a year, 1 operator, 1 tandem, 22. A gravel from the Verona pit to a road that's closed. $11,400 a year, fuel and wages, and material. Nobody's driven that grade in 62 years. I remember the number. He turned the packet over so the cover sheet was face down, which he does. Board liked it. So there's no reason for it. Didn't say that. He looked at the window for about 4 seconds. Drain bank protection. It's a drain fund line. It's not a road line. You want it back on. You'd have to take it to the drain commissioner. And Elwood is not going to reopen a line I already got credit for closing. I'm not asking for it back. I'm asking what it was for. Compaction, Jerry said. That's what the line says. Frost season compaction of the drain bank. Then he asked me why I was asking, and I told him I had a counterfault at the south gate. And he said to get it fixed before April because he did not want a single unexplained segment in the certification. That was the whole conversation. It lasted maybe 6 minutes. When I got back to my desk, I pulled up my own September memo. And the last line of it, which I had written and been proud of, said that the practice appeared to be a holdover with no documented purpose. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in Bad Axe, with a folder and a laptop, while my son did homework across from me. Wes is 10. He has asthma, the moderate kind that means a rescue inhaler in the school office and a controller inhaler on the shelf above the sink. And my share of the family premium out of my check is $412 a month. He wanted to talk about travel hockey, which is $900 for the season plus tournaments. And I told him what I always tell him, which is that we would look at it in March when I knew what the year looked like. He is a decent kid about money. He asked me instead what I was looking at. And I said a car. And he said whose. And I said that was the part I was working on. My hand counter was on the table next to the folder. It is a chrome tally counter with a thumb lever and a little reset wheel, the kind an usher uses at a high school gym door. And I bought it at a hardware store in Sandusky for $9 my first spring on the job because the electronic ones fail in cold. I had used it that Tuesday standing at the Oobly school, crossing counting axles for a flashing beacon warrant. 406 in 90 minutes. And I had not reset it. 406 was still in the window. Wes picked it up and clicked it twice and put it back down. And I wrote the new number in the margin so I would not forget it was corrupted. Friday, January 9th. I went out to the yard on the west edge of Bad Axe at 6:30 in the morning to catch Dwayne Mikulski before he took a truck out. Dwayne is 61 and has run a tandem for the commission for 22 years. And the reason I wanted him is that his name is on nearly every hall ticket in the drain fund going back to 2003. He was standing at the fuel island with a gas station coffee, the big one with the plastic lid. And there was a half load of 22A in his box that he had not been dispatched for. I knew that because I keep the dispatch sheets. I asked him about the Pell grade haul. I told him it had been a weekly run for as long as our records went, that I had cut it, and that I wanted to know from the man who drove it what it was actually doing. He drank some coffee. He asked me what day it was, and I said Friday, and he said no. And then he asked the question I have thought about more than anything else anybody has said to me in my working life. How many days since a load went over it? I had to count it in my head, and the counting felt strange because I already knew he did not mean it casually. Last ticket in the fund was December 19th. My gate check was the 20th. The frames were the 29th. 9, I said. 9 days, from the last ticket to the 29th. Dwayne set his coffee down on the fender of the truck. He did it slowly, the way you do when you want to be holding nothing. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking out past the salt shed toward the road. And when he spoke, his voice had gone flat, in a way I had never heard from him at a job site, or at a funeral, or anywhere else. Who took the haul off the sheet? I did, I said. Dwayne would not answer me at the fuel island. He picked his coffee back off the fender, told me the gravel in his box was going to his own driveway on Verona Road, and swung up into the cab. And the last thing he said before he pulled the door shut was that I should put the haul back on the sheet and stop asking him about it. I told him I could not put a line back into a fund without a written reason, because that is not how a fund works. He said he knew that. He said that was the whole problem. And he drove out of the yard with a half load and no dispatch ticket. And I stood there long enough for my hands to go numb before I went inside. The first thing I did was get the arithmetic exactly right. Because if I was going to be wrong, I wanted to be wrong on purpose. The last loaded pass over the Pell grade was December 19th, a Friday. Half a box of 22A gravel. No ticket in the fund, but a fuel card entry at 6:04 that morning. December 20th through December 28th is 9 full days with nothing heavier than a rabbit on that grade. The camera fired at 1:22 in the morning on the 29th, which is the front edge of the 10th day and the back edge of the 9th night. 9, the way a man who drives a truck would count it. Then I went at it the only way I know how, which is with crash reports. In Michigan, every reportable crash gets a UD-10, a 4-page state form the responding officer fills out. And I keep everyone that happens on a Huron County road, plus the state trunk line ones the sheriff copies us on. That is how a county gets a flashing beacon or a guardrail run funded. You do not get money for a bad feeling about a curve. You get it by proving that 11 cars left the road there in 5 years. I built a filter. Single vehicle, no contact with another unit, no animal struck, no alcohol or drug indication. Driver conscious and interviewed. And the driver's own statement saying they steered off the pavement to avoid a vehicle that was never located. That last one matters. There is a checkbox for hit and run, and there is a narrative field. And what I was looking for lives in the narrative field, where a deputy types the phrase "came at me" and then has nowhere official to put it. On M25 between Huron City and the north edge of Port Hope, 6 4/10 miles of shoreline highway, there are 9 of them in 64 years. January 11th, 1968, 1:30 in the morning, a pulpwood hauler in the east ditch. Driver said a black car crossed at him with one headlight. February 19th, 1978, 4:14 in the afternoon. 2 dead in a station wagon that went through a fence and into a field. And the only surviving witness statement in the file is from a woman in a following car who said the wagon swerved for nothing at all. December 31st, 1983. March 9th, 1996. February 14th, 2004. January 28th, 2011. March 21st, 2019. 2 more I will get to. In the other 8 months of the year, across the same 6 4/10 miles and the same 64 years, that filter returns 0. Not a few. 0. Every single one of the 9 falls between December 8th and April 4th, which in the thumb is the window when the clay under the road is frozen solid and same stays frozen. I had seen part of this before, and that is the part I have to say plainly. In 2022, I wrote a 9-page memo on the Port Hope stretch recommending deer crossing signs and a brush cutback because the crash density was high and 4 of the reports mentioned an animal. 2 of the 9 are inside that memo. I put them in a table under a heading that said probable wildlife related. And I did not read the narratives because the narratives are not a data field. And I had 110 reports to code that month. The signs went up in 2023. They are still up. I met Cheryl Tibbetts at the diner on Huron Avenue at 6 in the morning on January 16th, because that is when she gets off nights. She is 36, she does crash reconstruction for the sheriff, and she is the only person in the county who measures things the way I do. I put the list in front of her face down and asked her to tell me about non-contact runoff road reports on M25 before she looked at it. They get written up as driver error, she said, because that's what the form allows. No contact, no debris, no paint transfer, no second vehicle located. If I can't put a Unit 2 on the sheet, then Unit 1 failed to maintain control. You believe that? I believe the form. She turned the list over then and read it while her eggs got cold. She got to 2019 and stopped. I worked that one. Kid was 22, still lives in Ubli, walks with a cane now. He told me 4 times the car had one light, and it was in his lane, and it never turned. I wrote failed to maintain control, and I sat in his mother's kitchen and told her what the report said. And she asked me if I was calling her son a liar. What did you say? I said the report doesn't have a place for what he saw. She slid the list back. You show me a second unit, and I will reopen every one of these. She got me the 1978 file out of their basement that week, which she did not have to do. 2 fatalities, a mother and her sister, and no charges, and a hand-typed addendum from a sergeant noting that the County Road Commission had been contacted regarding the condition of the Pell Road barricades and had responded that the segment was secure. Somebody in 1978 had the same idea I had. Nothing came of it. The file closed in 11 days. The hall tickets took longer. Drain fund records do not live in our building. They live in the courthouse basement in Bad Axe, in 14 bankers' boxes, and a bound ledger series that starts in 1954. And the clerk let me sit on a folding chair down there with a box on my knees as long as I signed in. The line item is called 16-mile drain. Bank protection, frost season compaction. It has been funded every year since 1962 without a single break. From 1958 to 1994, the entries are typed, initialed AK, and never once do they use the word road. I matched the 9 crash dates against every documented gap in the hall. A gap is easy to see because a weekly line item makes a column, and a missing week makes a hole in the column. 1968. The pit was shut for a strike in January, and there is no ticket for 2 weeks. 1983. Blizzard, 3 weeks. 1996. An operator was in the hospital. 2011. A truck was down for a rear end. Every one of the 9 crashes falls within 11 days of the end of a gap in that column. 9 for 9. It is not clean. There are 4 gaps in 64 years where nothing shows up in the crash data at all. And I could not tell you why. And the tickets before 1974 are incomplete, because a water line let go in that basement in 1981, and they threw out what was pulped. So I had a pattern with holes in it. I also had a bound ledger in one woman's initials that proved the county had been paying to drive a loaded truck over a road it swore was impassable for longer than I'd been alive. A K was not hard to find. Alvina Kreft is 88 and lives in Harbor Beach in the house she has lived in since 1960. And she was the road commission bookkeeper from 1958 until 1994. I called her on a Sunday afternoon and said I was the traffic technician and I had questions about the drain fund. There was a pause on the line long enough that I said her name again. "Is it still going out?" she said. "Is what still going out?" "The truck." Her voice was thin, but it was not confused. "Every week. Frost season, and they don't skip. Is it still going out?" I told her it had been cut in September. I told her I had cut it. She did not say anything to that for a while. And then she said something I wrote down, word for word, on the back of an envelope. And I have that envelope. I typed that line for 36 years, and I never once typed the word road in it, she said. Not once. That was on purpose. You go look at what I wrote and you tell me if you can find it. Then she said there was a finding against her name from a 1979 audit. A state auditor who wrote up an unsupported expenditure and put her initials next to it, and that it was still in the file, and that she had asked twice to have it removed and been told no. "I'm not talking about this on a telephone," she said. "You come here. Bring the finding." On February 16th, I went into Jerry's office and asked him to restore the hall. I did not tell him about the crashes. I told him I had found 64 years of unbroken funding. Our an 88-year-old bookkeeper who said the line was written the way it was written on purpose, and a camera event I could not explain, and that I wanted a work order putting a loaded tandem over the Pell grade weekly until the frost went out. He had the certification packet open. The state wants our mileage certified by the 2nd week of April, and every closed segment has to be listed with a status. 7 weeks, he said. You want me to reopen a drain line I closed in the middle of certification and put a loaded truck on a vacated segment. And the reason on the paper is going to say what? A camera hiccup and a woman in Harbor Beach? The reason can say frost protection of the drain bank. That's what it said for 64 years. And then somebody asks me what changed in September. He tapped the packet twice with 2 fingers. Nadine, you wrote the memo that says there's no documented purpose. That's in the file. If I put it back now, that memo is the exhibit. He was not angry. He was doing arithmetic that had his insurance in it. Fix your camera. Certify the segment closed. In April, the ground thaws, and whatever this is, it isn't. 3 days later, I filed my quarterly equipment report. And that is the part I would take back if I could take back one thing. The report reconciles fuel card gallons against dispatch mileage, truck by truck, and Unit 411. Dwayne's tandem showed 162 miles logged on 21 consecutive Fridays, with no dispatch ticket attached to a single one. I could have left it out. I have never left anything out of that report in 11 years. And I told myself that was integrity. And it was also the easiest thing to do. Jerry read it. February 19th and pulled the keys to 411 that afternoon and put a written warning in Dwayne's file. Dwayne found me in the lot at quitting time. He did not raise his voice. He asked me if I understood that I had just taken the last load off the grade, and I said I did not know that. And he said that was the truth, and it was not a defense. Then he asked me what day it was, and I said Thursday, February 19th. And he nodded and walked to his own pickup and did not look back at me. His knee replacement is scheduled for August. He needs to still be an employee in August. That night, I bought a camera. $140 of my own money at the farm store in Bad Axe. The kind deer hunters run. 6 megapixels and a real infrared flash instead of the wide-angle county unit that turns a license plate into a gray smear. On Saturday, I hiked up the inside of the grade in my own boots on my own time and strapped it to a cedar at 400 feet north of the south gate, aimed south down the road bed at about a 40-degree angle, 3 feet off the ground. My tally counter was in my coat pocket. I had reset it to 0 that morning without deciding to. Then I counted days, out loud, in the truck, like a schedule. February 20th was day 1. I took 2 vacation days I did not want to take. On the 28th, day 9, I put Wes to bed and told him we would talk about hockey in March. And I sat in the kitchen in Bad Axe, 18 miles from that gate, with the scanner on, and did not sleep. I pulled the card at 7:15 in the morning on March 1st. The new camera got 11 frames. A dark 2-door sedan, 1 working lamp low and right, passing the Cedar southbound at 1:39 in the morning, and, in frame 7, the rear of the car is square to the lens at about 20 feet, and the plate is legible enough to read 4 characters and a stack of black on white that Michigan stopped issuing before my mother was born. At 2:11 that morning, while I was sitting at my own table with the scanner on, for Port Hope Fire had been paged out to M25 for a semi-jackknifed in the East Ditch with the driver still in the cab. And the deputy on scene was Cheryl Tibbetts. And there was no second vehicle. The semi-driver lived. He was a 44-year-old hauling sugar beet pulp out of Croswell. He put his rig in the East Ditch at 2:11 in the morning on March 1st. And when Cheryl interviewed him at the hospital in Bad Axe, he said a car with 1 headlight came at him in his own lane and never turned. She wrote failed to maintain control, because that is what the form allows. And she called me from the parking lot before she went home. I told her I had 11 frames. She met me at the county building at 9 and stood behind my chair while I brought them up on the big monitor. And she did not say anything until frame 7. 4 characters, black background, white numerals, and the sequence I could read was 64-something, with the last 2 figures cut by the frame edge. Michigan issued black on white in 1951, and only that year in that exact combination. And the 2-letter county prefix system in use then means the sequence starts with a numeral only if the plate was issued as a commercial or a dealer replacement. Cheryl ran it. She had to run it as a records request rather than a hot plate, because a query on a plate that has not existed since Eisenhower kicks back an error. And it took her 9 days and a phone call to a retired clerk in Lansing to get anything. What came back was not a registration. It was a sheriff's disposal release from November of 1951, 1 page, listing a vehicle held in the county impound as a total loss and released to the Huron County Road Commission for the sum of $1, with a plate number, an engine number, and a signature block. The plate matched the 4 characters I had. The vehicle was a 1951 Ford 2-door. The release was signed by the drain commissioner, and the name on the signature line was Harold Kreft. Cheryl put the page on my desk and asked me who Harold Kreft was. And I said he was a drain commissioner from 1954 to 1988. And she said the release was dated 1951, 3 years before that. And I said then he signed it as a deputy or a clerk. And either way, he was in the room. She said that was the first document in the whole thing with a human being's name on it. She was right. Every other piece of paper I had was initials and line items. I found the crash next. It took 2 days in the courthouse basement and 1 call to the Historical Society in Port Hope, which keeps the Huron County Tribune on microfilm. On November 2nd, 1951, at 1:22 in the morning, a 1951 Ford 2-door left M25, 2 miles south of Port Hope, struck a culvert head wall and burned. 1 occupant, a 29-year-old man from Bad Axe. The state accident report is 2 pages, hand-typed, and under vehicle condition it says left headlamp destroyed on impact, right headlamp operable. 1:22 in the morning, 1 working lamp, low and right. I sat in that basement with the microfilm reader humming and did the thing I do, which is check whether I want it to be true. So I went and got the 1968 report. The pulpwood hauler in the East Ditch at 1:30 in the morning, who said a black car came at him with 1 headlight. And I looked for a crash on that stretch in the historical record at 1:30 in the morning, and I found 1. March of 1953. And then I looked at my second camera's timestamp, 1:39 in the morning, and went looking for a crash at 1:39 and found nothing at all, and that hole is still in my folder. The bumper guard came out of the ground on March 4th. Frost heave is ordinary in the thumb. The clay takes water, freezes, and lifts. And in a normal spring, our gravel roads push up stones the size of loaves of bread. I was walking the grade at 1,100 feet north of the south gate, looking at nothing in particular, when I saw a curve of brightness in the wheel track, where the crown had cracked open about 3 inches. It took me 20 minutes with a tire iron. Chrome-plated steel, 11 inches on the outside curve, 4 pounds 2 ounces on the postal scale in our office, 1 carriage bolt still through it with the nut rusted into a solid lump. On the back face, stamped, a part number and the letters FOMOCO, which is Ford Motor Company. And I found the number in an online parts index in about 4 minutes. Front bumper guard, 1951 Ford, passenger side. It is the piece of metal that sticks up off the bumper like a small chrome tooth. That afternoon I made a plaster cast at the south gate apron, in the frozen slush where the grade drops onto the shoulder, because there was a clean impression 11 days old in ground that had not thawed. Tread width 6 1/2 inches. Pattern is a straight rib highway tire with 4 ribs and no lateral grooves, which the reference material at the State Library calls a discontinued commercial rib pattern, last catalogued in 1958. Front axle to rear axle, 121 inches. A 1951 Ford 2-door has a wheelbase of 114 inches. So the cast is not the Ford. It is something else with a longer frame. And that was the first moment I understood that the number I should have been chasing was not one. I brought all of it to Jerry on March 5th. The guard on a shop rag, the cast in a cardboard flat, the disposal release, the 1951 report, and the 11 frames printed at 8 by 10. I asked for a written work order, restoring a loaded pass over the Pell grade every 7 days until April 15th. I said I would drive it myself on my own time if he would sign the paper. He looked at the bumper guard for a long time. He picked it up, which I did not expect, and he turned it over and read the stamp with his glasses pushed up on his forehead. Where'd this come from? 1,100 feet up the grade, heaved out of the wheel track. Then it's fill, Jerry said. The whole grade is fill. They built roads out of whatever was cheap in the 50s. He set it down. I'm not signing an order that says the county drives a truck over a closed road to stop something from coming out of it. Then don't write that. Write frost protection. That's a lie, and I'd be the one signing it. He said it flat, without any performance, and that is the sentence of his I have thought about most. You want me to sign something false to fix something you can't name. Ask yourself what you'd do with my file if you found that in it. I told him the state auditor had already written up an unsupported expenditure on this exact line in 1979, and it was still in the file, and that whoever wrote it did not know what it was for either. He said that was his point. He said the difference between him and Harold Kreft was that Harold Kreft did not have a state portal that time-stamped everything he entered. Then he asked me to certify the Pell segment closed and impassable, which was true, and which I did on March 6th, and that signature is mine, and I do not have a defense for it beyond the fact that it was accurate. Dwayne blocked me in the yard the next morning. He parked his own pickup nose to nose with the county truck so I could not pull out, walked around and stood at my window, and he had not shaved, and his eyes were bad. You showed him the paper, he said. I showed him everything I have. That's what kills it. He put one hand on the mirror bracket. 22 years I never got a work order for that run. Roy Sanderling handed me the keys in '03 and said you take a half load over Pell every Friday from freeze up to break up, and you don't put it on the sheet. And I said, why? And he said because a sheet gets reviewed and a habit doesn't. I asked him twice. He never told me. I quit asking. You could have told me in December. And you'd have written it down. He said it without heat. You wrote down my fuel card. You wrote down my mileage. That's what you do, and I don't even blame you for it. But Nadine, every man who ever put that run on a piece of paper got it cut inside 2 years. 1979, somebody wrote it up. 94, somebody wrote it up. You wrote it up. He took his hand off the mirror. It survived 64 years because nobody ever explained it. I asked him where he got the gravel after February 19th. He looked at the salt shed. Verona pit, cash. $41 a yard for the 222A. Then he told me the rest of it, and I got it confirmed off his own fuel card statements later, which he handed me himself without being asked. Since 2009, every week the fun ticket did not cover. Dwayne Mikulski bought gravel with his own money and burned his own diesel and drove a half load over a closed road for a reason he had never been given. $211 a month in fuel in the frost season. He never once wrote it down. They pulled the keys, I said. They pulled the keys. He straightened up. So it's on you now. And you've got 7 weeks of frost left. And you already told the boss the truth. That was the one thing you had. He moved his pickup. He did not say anything else to me for 6 weeks. I went to Harbor Beach on March 11th with the 1979 audit finding in a folder on the passenger seat. And I did not get past the porch that day because Alvina had been taken to Shore Hospital with pneumonia on the 9th. And her niece told me to try in a week, so I went back to the courthouse basement instead and pulled the one box I had been saving, which was labeled 16-mile drain, construction and placement, 1938 to 1962. 2 documents in that box changed the shape of everything. The first was a 1968 contract, awarded and then canceled, for excavation and removal of subsurface obstructions from the vacated Pell road grade, $11,200 to a contractor out of Sandusky, canceled 41 days after award with a handwritten note across the face of it reading work suspended, backfill and compact relet. The relet bid, attached, is for backfill only. Somebody in 1968 started digging them out and then stopped and paid more money to put the dirt back. The second was a 1982 purchase order for 11 precast concrete median barriers, 4,000 pounds apiece, placed at the south gate of the Pell grade in November of 1982. There is a 1983 work order removing all 11 in April, 17 months early, with the reason field filled in with 3 words. Interferes with maintenance. 1983 is the December 31st crash. That barrier wall stood at the south gate for the exact winter that a man died on M25, and the county tore it out and never put it back. I found the gate logbook in the same box, a green hardbound thing our maintenance foreman kept until we went electronic in '98. And I read every frost season entry in it twice. March 9th, 1996, in pencil, in handwriting I could not attribute. Southgate, 2 vehicles out, 9 minutes apart. 2. There is 1 crash on record for March 9th, 1996. I have never accounted for the second one, and I've stopped trying. The last thing in the box was a manila folder with a typed cover sheet, and the cover sheet is what I photocopied 4 times and put in 4 different places. 16-mile drain, bank protection program, 1938 through 1962, summary of placement. Total units placed as bank protection, 91. Source, county impound and sheriff's disposal. Total loss vehicles. Purchase price $1 per unit. Placement schedule attached. See pages 1 through 11. There were no pages 1 through 11. The staple was still in the corner with 11 punched holes hanging off it, torn clean. And the cover sheet had a date stamp in the margin from the clerk's office, and the stamp said 1994. 11 pages torn off a staple in 1994. The same year Alvina Kreft retired. And the only person alive who had touched that box before me was in a hospital bed in Harbor Beach, with fluid in both lungs. I called Schurer every day for a week. On March 16th, her niece said she was home and awake and asking whether the woman with the folder was coming. The house is on a corner 2 blocks off the lake, aluminum siding. A ramp built over the front steps. She had a card table set up in the kitchen with a plastic tablecloth on it and a coffee urn plugged in behind her. The 8-cup kind you see at a church basement funeral lunch. And she poured me a cup before she would look at anything. 88 years old, oxygen line under her nose. And she read the 1979 audit finding front to back without her hands shaking. Unsupported expenditure, she said. Recurring. Bookkeeper unable to produce documentation of public purpose. She set it down. I could have produced it. I had it in my desk drawer for 36 years. I asked her what it was. It's in the hall closet, top shelf, under the tablecloths. 11 pages, typed on onion skin. 3-hole punched, torn of the punches. 16-mile drain, placement schedule, Unit 1 through Unit 91. Each line has a unit number, a date of placement, a station number along the grade, a source, and a make and model year. Unit 1, September of 1938. Station 8 plus 40, 1931. Chevrolet coach, Unit 91, April of 1962. Station 92 plus 10, 1959, Plymouth sedan. 91 wrecked automobiles bought for $1 apiece out of the county impound and pushed into the bank of a county drain to keep the clay from sliding, then buried under dredge spoil when the state made the practice illegal. I asked her why she took the pages. Because in '94, they hired a man from Lansing to inventory the drain files. And Harold was dead 3 years, and there was nobody left to tell him no. She turned her cup around on the tablecloth. You can have all of it. I want the finding off my name. That's the whole trade. I'm not embarrassed about the money. I'm embarrassed it says I couldn't document it. Then she told me what her husband learned in 1962. And she told it the way a bookkeeper tells anything in order, with dates. Harold Kreft finished the last placement in April of 1962 and vacated the road that summer. And that December, the county had a diesel strike and no truck went anywhere for 2 weeks. On the 22nd of December, 1962, a man named Emil Soa's 1953 Studebaker came out of the south gate at 9:40 at night. And a school bus driver headed home empty put his bus into the west ditch to miss it. And got out and walked back and found nothing on the road at all. Harold went out there with a lantern and a shovel and found Unit 80 gone from Station 71 plus 20. He filled the hole himself. He kept a page, she said, adding machine tape. He wrote down every week the truck went out and every week it didn't, for 9 years. And then he stopped writing it because he had it. She held up one finger. 9 days. Frost in the ground, and 9 days with nothing heavy on that grade. And the last one he put in comes out. Not the first one. The last one still down there. Then it's the one before it. He said it was like a stack. And the truck stops it. A load stops it. He weighed it. 28,000 pounds on the axles, minimum. And the counting starts over the minute the load rolls through. Half a box of gravel in a tandem does it. That's why it was always a half load. And that's why the line says compaction. Because compaction is what a county can pay for. She breathed for a second. Frost only. April comes and the ground lets go and they stay put. Every year, same as the drain. I asked her what they do when they come out. They go where they crashed the first time. They get there at the same time of night, the report says. And they don't touch a thing, Miss Ostrom. Not a fence post, not a mailbox. Harold measured it. He looked for it. He wanted it to be nothing. She looked at the window. The only people who ever got hurt were the ones who saw it coming and turned the wheel. That is the entire mechanism. And I want to be honest that she could not tell me one word about why. Neither could Harold. He wrote a number on an adding machine tape and then paid for a truck for 26 more years. She explained 1968 before I asked. Harold hired the excavation because he thought removal was the permanent answer. And the contractor got 4 units out in 6 days. And on the 7th day, 2 came out of the ground in one night, 40 minutes apart. And one of them met a man on M25. He canceled the contract and paid $11,000 more to put the dirt back and never touched them again. 1982 was the barriers, which were somebody else's idea after Harold retired. 11 precast barriers, £4,000 each at the south gate. Didn't stop it, Alvina said. Went out through the ditch line and up the field lane, and the truck couldn't get on the grade anymore. She let that sit. That's the winter the young man died on New Year's Eve. They pulled the barriers in April and never talked about it again. When I left, she asked me to write down the last date a load went over. I told her February 19th. She did the arithmetic in her head faster than I did. I drove back to Bad Axe with 11 pages of onion skin on the passenger seat and made a decision in the truck between Kienda and Elkton. And I've never once been able to describe it in a way that makes me sound like a person I would hire. I had by then everything I needed to stop it. I had a set of county keys and a tandem in the yard, and a pit that sells 22A gravel for $41 a yard, and $1,100 in a savings account. I could have put a half load over that grade on my own money, the way Dwayne had done for 15 years, and told nobody. £28,000. One pass. It would have taken 2 hours. What I did instead was count. February 19th was the last load. March 1st was the exit that put a semi in the ditch, and that reset nothing, because a sedan weighs 3,000 pounds. So the clock had been running since the 19th of February, and it had already produced one event. And the next window was going to open whether I was standing at the gate or sitting in my kitchen. And I told myself the useful thing was to see it. I told myself that a man who dies while I'm 18 miles away in my house dies anyway, and that a man who dies while I'm at the gate with a camera and a tape at least dies in a file that somebody can act on. I did not put a load on that grade. I decided that on M53 with the heat on, and my son's inhaler prescription in the console because I had picked it up that afternoon, and I want that in the record. $412 a month for the insurance and $900 for a hockey season. And none of that was in my head. It was not money. I wanted to see it. The counting is not clean, and I need to say that too, because Alvina's 9 days start from the last load, and my 9 days start from the same place. And the March 1st exit sat inside the same gap. So I did not know whether one gap gives one release or gives one every 9 days until it is fed. That was the actual question I took out to the gate. And the answer cost a man 27 years old. March 17th was day 26 since the last loaded pass, and day 16 since the March 1st exit. I parked in the field lane on the west side, 90 feet from the south gate opening, with the truck shut off and the window down. 19 degrees, clear. I had the county camera on the cedar post, my own camera at 400 feet north. A decibel meter I had signed out for a pavement noise study, a stopwatch, and my tally counter in my right glove. At 1:51 in the morning, it came down the grade. I want to describe it the way I would describe anything I was going to put my name to. Tires on frozen gravel, a crunching and popping I picked up at 300 feet and read at 58 decibels on the meter at closest approach, which is about what a dishwasher sounds like in the next room. No engine, not a quiet engine. No engine sound at all, no exhaust, no fan, no valve train, nothing. And the meter never showed a low-frequency component. One lamp low and to the right of center, throwing a yellow cone maybe 15 feet up the roadbed. And the lamp did not sweep or dim. A dark four-door with a heavy chrome grille and a sun visor over the windshield. A longer body than the Ford in my frames. And I could see the driver's window was down. It passed the gate opening at 41 miles an hour, which I got off 2 marks I had set at 100 feet apart with a wheel and a stopwatch. And it dropped onto the shoulder of M25 and turned south. And the frozen slush on that apron did not scatter. I smelled wet clay and hot iron. That is the closest I can get. Cold mud and a brake drum after a long grade. I pressed the counter once when the front bumper crossed the near mark. I pressed it once when the rear bumper crossed the far mark. My hand was shaking hard enough that the second press felt like nothing at all. So I looked down at the window to check, and the counter read 2, and then it slipped out of my glove and hit the frozen apron on the corner of the case. I picked it up. The lever still worked. It advances 2 per press now. I have never had it fixed. I got 22 frames on my own camera and 9 on the county unit. The plate on this one was legible in 3 of them. I sat there and wrote the time in my field book, 1:51 in the morning, March 18th technically. And I wrote the speed and the decibel reading and the temperature. And there is no form in the state of Michigan that any of that goes on. I know, because I have filled out all of them. At 2:03, the scanner on my dash ran a tone for Huron County Central and paged Port Hope Fire and the Sheriff to M25. 1 mile south of the Trombley Road intersection, single vehicle, off the roadway, 1 occupant, extrication. I was at the gate. I did not go. I turned the key and drove south with my headlights on and my hands at 10 and 2, and I got there before the ambulance because I was closer. And there was a propane delivery truck in the east ditch on its side with a cab folded into the bank, and no other vehicle anywhere, and no debris on the pavement, and no skid mark that did not start in the driver's own lane. I looked at my odometer before I got out. 3 1/10 miles from the south gate of the Pell Road grade to where he went off. And the time from the gate to the tone was 12 minutes, and 41 miles an hour covers 3 1/10 miles in 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Which meant it had been sitting somewhere for 7.5 minutes, waiting to be at the right place at the right time. Boyd Trombley was 27, and he delivered propane for a co-op out of Harbor Beach. And he had 1 stop left, a farmhouse tank on Kinch Road. And he was running it at 2 in the morning because a woman with a newborn had called in out of gas. He went off the east side of M25 1 mile south of the road his own family is named after. He died before the ambulance got there. There was no contact, no debris, no paint transfer, and no second vehicle located. I stood on the shoulder in the strobe light with my hands in my coat pockets for 40 minutes and did not tell one person there what I had watched go past me 12 minutes earlier at 41 miles an hour. I told myself I was waiting for Cheryl. That was true, and it was not the reason. When the wrecker had it upright and the deputies were walking the ditch with flashlights, I walked the shoulders south of the wreck, which nobody was doing because nothing happened south of the wreck. 40 feet down, in the gravel 2 feet off the white line, there was a strip of chrome trim, 18 1/4 inches long, 1 3/8 wide, with 3 clip studs on the back and one of them snapped off. Anodized aluminum, not steel, pitted white along the whole length. I put it in my coat pocket. I have never put anything in my pocket at a crash scene in 11 years. And I did it in front of 2 deputies who were looking somewhere else. And I do not have a word for that other than theft. It matched a 1953 Studebaker Commander rocker molding. Driver's side, in a parts index. Unit 80. Station 71, plus 20. Emil Sawa, who died on M25 on the 2nd of March, 1953, at 1:58 in the morning. Cheryl found me at the diner at 6. She had been on scene 4 hours, and she had Boyd's mother's address in her notebook, and she had to go there next. I put the 11 onion skin pages, the 22 frames, the placement schedule, the disposal release, and the strip of chrome on the table between the coffee cups. And I told her everything Alvina told me, in order, with dates. It took 18 minutes. She did not interrupt me once, which is not like her. Then she asked me one question. "What time were you at the gate?" 1:30. "And it went by you at 1:51. "Yes. And you didn't call it in." She was not accusing me. She was building a timeline, because that is her job. And she was checking whether there had been a window. If you'd raised the dispatcher at 1:52 and said, "Get everybody off M25 south of Port Hope," what happens? Central asks me what I'm reporting. I say a 1953 Studebaker. They asked me for a plate and a direction and a reason. I said the rest of it because she was going to say it if I did not. 11 minutes. Boyd's already rolling south out of Harbor Beach with a load. There's no version of that call that gets to him. "No," she said. "There isn't." She turned the chrome strip over with one finger. "But you didn't try." She went to Boyd's mother's house at 8 in the morning and told her that her son did not cross the center line, that his lane position was correct at the point he left the pavement, and that whatever he steered for was on his side of the road. She had nothing on the form to support the last part, and she said it anyway, in a kitchen with a report in her bag that said failed to maintain control. She told the family they were entitled to know that Boyd drove correctly. I think she was right, and I think she also handed a grieving woman a thing she can never do anything with. And I've argued both sides of it in my own head for a year. Jerry called me in on March 19th at 8 in the morning, and there were 2 other people in the office, the board chairman and a woman from the county's insurance pool. And the certification packet was closed and squared on the desk. I gave them all of it. 91 units, the disposal releases, the frost window, the 9 days, the 28,000 pounds, the 1968 excavation, the 1982 barriers, 9 non-contact crashes in 64 years, and 0 outside the frost window, the 22 frames, the tread cast, the bumper guard, the chrome strip, and the fact that I had stood 90 feet from the south gate on the night of the 17th and watched Unit 80 leave the county's own road at 41 miles an hour making no engine noise. 12 minutes before a 27-year-old man died 3 1/10 miles south. Nobody in that room told me I was crazy. That is the part people do not believe. The insurance woman asked whether the county had ever removed the units, and I said 4 in 1968. And she asked what happened. And I told her, and she wrote it down, and then drew a line through it. Jerry asked me one question. "If we publish this, what happens to the road?" "It gets excavated," I said. "Or it gets fenced and posted, and there's a state hazard finding, and the drain gets an order." "And the truck?" "You can't run a loaded tandem on a segment under a hazard order." He nodded slowly and looked at the chairman, and the chairman looked at the folding table with the coffee urn on it. And that was the whole meeting. What came out of it over the next 11 days was not a cover-up in the way people mean the word. It was a budget. The line item now reads 16-mile drain, bank protection, frost season aggregate placement, and compaction, and it is funded at $19,200 a year out of the drain fund, which is not the road fund, and is not in the Act 51 certification, and is not reported to the state as road maintenance. It pays for 1 operator, 1 tandem, a half load of 22A gravel, weekly from the first hard freeze to breakup, plus a standing purchase agreement with the Verona pit. It is a permanent line. It cannot be cut by a technician writing an efficiency memo, because the memo that made it cuttable is gone. My September 9th memo is not in the file. I looked on April 2nd. The document control log shows it superseded, and the superseding document is a 1-page revised recommendation dated September 9th, same year, with my name on it, recommending continuation of frost season compaction on the 16-mile drain bank protection segment. I did not write it. I did not sign it. It has my typed name and no signature block, which is legal in our system for a technical recommendation. I asked Jerry about it in the hallway, and he said the file had to be consistent. And I said, consistent with what? and he said with what the county is doing. Then he handed me the certification. Every closed segment listed with a status. And Pell road grade, 2 1/10 miles. Status closed and impassable. No maintenance activity. I signed it on April 3rd. It is a false statement in a state submittal. It carries my certification number. And I am the person who understands exactly how false it is. I also took the winter road. I asked for it in writing. 1 paragraph. And Jerry approved it in 1 line. From the first hard freeze to breakup, I put a half load of 22A gravel over the Pell road grade every 7 days. 29,400 pounds on the axles by the yard scale at the pit. And I write the ticket. And the ticket says compaction. In April, I did one more thing before the ground let go. I rented a magnetic locator from a utility supply house in Saginaw for $260, the kind that finds a buried well casing. And I walked the grade from Station 0 to Station 110 in 11-foot passes over 3 days. 79 anomalies of vehicle size and depth. The schedule says 91. 4 came out in 1968. 8 are not there and never were as far as I can prove. And I do not know whether that means 8 left before 1962 or 8 were never placed, or whether a 1938 typist put a number in the wrong column. Unit 79 is next. 1944, tank truck, 1,400 gallons. Station 68 plus 90, placed November of 1961. Original crash, 4:10 in the afternoon, at the 4-way stop in the middle of Harbor Beach, which is a town of 1,100 people with a school 2 blocks from that intersection. That is why I drive it. Not for the record, and not for Boyd Trombley, who is dead, and not for my certification, which is compromised, but because the next one comes out at 4:10 in the afternoon into a 4-way stop in a town. And it will not touch anybody, and everybody will turn the wheel. Where everyone ended up. Alvina Kreft died in July on the 11th at 89, and the 1979 audit finding is still in the file with her initials beside it, because to remove it, the county would have to state what the expenditure was for. Jerry Lentz took an early retirement in October, 18 months short of his bridge, and paid for his own insurance in the gap. And the last thing he said to me was that he had funded it permanently, and that was the most he could do. Cheryl Tibbetts requested Marine Patrol in June and got it. And she still tells families their people drove correctly. Dwayne Mikulski went out on disability in August after the knee, sits on his porch on Verona Road, and waved at me the first Friday I came through loaded, and we have never discussed it since. Wes played travel hockey, $900, and he is a middling defenseman. And I paid for it out of the winter overtime the route generates. A road commission spends 64 years telling a small lie because the true sentence has no form to go on. The tally counter rides in the door pocket of Unit 411 now. The case corner is flattened where it hit the frozen apron, and the lever advances 2 on every press. So when I count my passes over the grade, I have to divide. And this past winter, it read 32 at breakup. 16 loads. 8 units left down there that I cannot find, and 79 that I can. I check the number every Friday before I turn onto the grade. And then I put it back in the pocket, and I drive north with the load. 8 units are not down there, and the schedule says they were placed. I do not know what road they are on. If you know a story like this one, the comments are open. I read them.